Welcome the anointed ones. When three unlikely allies, a bitter ex, a crooked lawyer, and a badge for hire, sit at the same table, you can be certain they weren't meeting for brunch. Chosen ones, let's pause here. Did you know that over 70% of wrongful convictions in the US involve suppressed or tampered evidence? Think about that. The truth didn't just get misplaced, it was manually buried. That's not a mistake, it's intent. And now, investigations have unearthed something shocking. Your ex, your lawyer, and a dirty cop weren't just lurking in the shadows of your story. They were actively hiding the very crime committed against you. This isn't some TV drama plotline. This is the reality you were trapped in, where betrayal came in a suit, in a uniform, and from a person who once whispered, "I love you." They weren't protecting the law, they weren't protecting justice, and they certainly weren't protecting you. They were protecting themselves. And let's be real, the lineup itself is almost laughable. An ex, a lawyer, and a cop walk into a conspiracy. It sounds like the setup to a bad joke. But the punchline? It was your life, your safety, your dignity on the line. What they thought they buried was supposed to stay hidden forever, yet here we are. Receipts, revelations, and a whole lot of nervous gulps happening in back offices right now. So sit tight, because this isn't just about exposing a cover-up. It's about unraveling the psychology of power, betrayal, and fear, and showing you how their web is finally collapsing under its own lies. The deeper we go, the clearer it becomes. You weren't the victim of one crime, but of an entire system of collusion designed to erase you. And yet, you're still here. Number one, the cover-up was the true confession. They thought the smartest move was to bury the crime, but what they didn't realize is that the cover-up was the loudest confession they could ever make. Covering something up isn't neutral. It's an action that screams guilt. Think about it. Innocent people don't spend their nights plotting how to hide evidence, falsify documents, or silence witnesses. Only the guilty do. Every time they delayed paperwork, altered details, or created some excuse for why things couldn't move forward, they were practically writing their own statement of admission. Their silence wasn't protection. It was strategy. And strategy always has a root: fear. The fear wasn't just about the crime itself being revealed. It was about who it was committed against. Because when crimes are hidden against someone ordinary, it might not make waves beyond a local scandal. But when it's hidden against a chosen one, the stakes skyrocket. They knew your story would not stop at a police report. They knew your story could ripple into places that touched reputations, careers, and entire institutions. That's why they didn't just sweep this under the rug. They cemented the rug to the floor and bolted it down. What makes this revelation so heavy is that the cover-up always outlives the crime. The crime may have been done in a night, in a moment of desperation or evil, but the cover-up is ongoing. It requires constant maintenance, people making phone calls, people keeping their stories straight, people watching you like a hawk to ensure you never uncover too much. They chained themselves to their own guilt, and every step they took trying to conceal the truth became more evidence of their corruption. That's why exposure always feels like a shock to them, but not to you. You lived through the uneasiness. You felt the moments that didn't add up. You noticed the doors that mysteriously stayed shut, the sudden hostility from people who should have been allies, the way the system itself seemed to bend unnaturally against you. They thought they were being clever, but all they were doing was layering their confessions in plain sight. The truth is, the cover-up was never a shield. It was a mirror. And in that mirror, they exposed their motives, their guilt, and their fear of what would happen the day you found out. That day is now. And their silence, their manipulation, their desperate attempts to erase the past all stand as proof that the crime was real and they knew it. The cover-up is their confession. Period. Number 2, your ex wasn't just bitter. They were weaponized. Your ex didn't just carry heartache. They were turned into a weapon. That betrayal went beyond breakups and bitter texts. Your trust was hijacked, your vulnerabilities logged, your personal stories folded into dossiers. Someone needed a front line in their misconduct, and your ex became it. The purpose wasn't to hurt you alone. The purpose was to exploit your closeness. The ex had access to your daily rhythms, when you laughed, when you cried, who you called, what you told, everything that could be used. That access was traded, passed on, manipulated. You might think betrayal from someone you once loved is expected. What isn't expected is organized betrayal, where emotional wounds are turned into tools. Your ex didn't act alone. They were groomed by threats, lies or promises to supply information, to feed rumors, to obscure truths. They were damning your own reputation with inside knowledge. Innocent slips in conversations became evidence. Things you said in confidence twisted into ammunition. They weren't bitter just because of pain. They were trained to use what you shared against you. That happens when someone in power sees you as threat rather than person. Maybe your ex was promised something, favor, protection, silence, in exchange for compliance. Maybe they were coerced. Either way, they became a partner in hiding the crime, watching you from the inside while pretending to be broken. Every tear you shed, every confession you made, every weakness you revealed, all became entries in their ledger of leverage. Betrayal takes many forms. This one is cold, calculated, personal. When someone loves you, you offer trust. When someone weaponizes that trust, every shared memory, every unguarded moment becomes a risk. The betrayal is deeper than infidelity or anger. It's a breach of your identity. You find yourself doubting your own past, your own truth. They made you question whether the way you feel, the things you said, even the person you were, can be used against you. That is the most dangerous betrayal, because it doesn't end with exposure. It lives in your mind long after the ex has gone. The wound isn't just the crime committed against you. The wound is knowing someone you once believed in stood ready to help bury your truth. The weapon was not in their fist, it was in your trust. Number 3, the lawyer's role wasn't legal, it was logistical. The lawyer in your story didn't simply misrepresent you or make a few bad calls in court. They were the hidden mechanic keeping the machine of corruption running smoothly. Their job wasn't about defending your rights or upholding the law. Their role was to make sure every door to justice stayed locked and every loophole was wide open for the guilty. Lawyers have a unique power. They can speak the language of law in a way the average person can't. They know the codes, the technicalities, the fine print, and in your case, all of that knowledge wasn't used to protect you, but to protect the crime itself. When evidence went missing, that wasn't random. It had to pass through someone's hands, and that someone knew how to make the trail vanish without raising suspicion. When delays kept piling up, it wasn't because of clerical mistakes. It was intentional. Your lawyer was the one setting the calendar, filing motions, and conveniently stretching the timeline so that witnesses grew cold, memories faded, and your case looked weaker over time. These weren't blunders. They were calculated moves. The betrayal cuts deeper because a lawyer is supposed to be the one voice you can count on when the system turns against you. They wear the mask of professionalism, assuring you that things are complicated or still developing, while in reality They are feeding the other side with just enough breathing space to rewrite the story. It's not just unethical, it's treachery under the guise of service. They weren't your shield. They were the bridge connecting your enemies to the system. Think about the level of trust it takes to hand someone your defense. You gave them your story, your fears, your confidence that they'd fight for you. But instead of being an advocate, they became an architect of delay, a planner of confusion, and a broker of silence. They didn't argue to uncover the truth. They argued to keep it buried, making sure paperwork aligned with lies, and that your voice was muffled behind legal language that sounded too complex for you to question. This is why the exposure feels so jarring. It wasn't only about the crime committed against you. It's about realizing the very person meant to guard you in the storm was holding the umbrella over the guilty instead. That lawyer was never confused. They were never incompetent. They were deliberate, and their betrayal was one of the strongest pillars holding the entire cover-up together. Number 4. The dirty cop's badge was a mask. The dirty cop in your story was never a protector of the public. The badge they wore wasn't a symbol of honor. It was camouflage. Their uniform gave them automatic trust, a shortcut to authority, a way to move through the world unquestioned. But beneath that fabric and metal, they weren't upholding the law. They were bending it, warping it, and weaponizing it against you. Every arrest they made, every report they filed, every official action they took was less about justice and more about maintaining control. They didn't just stand by while the crime against you was hidden. They actively built the walls to keep it hidden. They weren't a neutral officer making mistakes. They were the gatekeeper ensuring nothing slipped out. Their role wasn't to protect victims but to shield predators, and in doing so, they were selling pieces of their integrity for power, connections, and career leverage. Your pain became their currency. Your silence became their ladder. That's the truth about corrupted authority. It doesn't simply allow injustice, it manufactures it. This officer was paid twice, once in their official salary, and again in favors, access, or backroom deals. Each falsified report, each lost piece of evidence, each intimidation tactic against witnesses was another brick in the wall of a cover-up they curated with precision. They weren't just complicit. They were orchestrating the flow of information, making sure anyone who tried to speak up would be discredited, discouraged, or disappeared from the process entirely. What makes this betrayal so severe is that a cop is supposed to be the last line of defense between chaos and safety. That uniform is supposed to mean you can breathe easier, not hold your breath. But this one weaponized the image of protector to become a predator. They weren't serving the community, they were serving themselves and whoever held their leash. When such a person is exposed, the shock ripples far beyond the crime. It erodes faith in the entire system because it reveals how easily authority can become a costume. They weren't a bad apple. They were an actor in a uniform, performing righteousness while practicing corruption. They didn't just betray you, they betrayed the very idea of justice. Number 5, you were placed on trial without a courtroom. You were never given the dignity of a fair fight. Long before any courtroom or legal proceeding existed, a silent verdict had already been written against you. They didn't need a judge or a jury to destroy your credibility. They used whispers, insinuations, and carefully planted doubts. The system around you became a shadow court, with no official walls, but with the full power to shape how people saw you. Instead of evidence being weighed, rumors were spread. Instead of facts being examined, your character was assassinated piece by piece until you looked like the problem rather than the victim. This wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. When powerful people want to bury a crime, the first thing they do is isolate the one person who can expose it. They don't need to lock you up physically. They lock you up in public opinion. By painting you as unstable, unreliable, or vindictive, they make it easier for others to dismiss your truth. That way, by the time you actually try to seek justice, no one is neutral anymore. Everyone has already been trained to doubt you. False reports and delayed evidence weren't just bureaucratic issues. They were part of this shadow trial. Delays weren't innocent mistakes. They were tactics to exhaust you, to make you doubt yourself, to ensure memories faded and witnesses lost interest. Each delay worked like a silent gavel, striking against your credibility, reinforcing the false narrative that you had something to hide. In reality, they were the ones hiding something. But the system had been tilted so far that you looked like the one on trial. This is what makes such a cover-up so cruel. It doesn't just steal your chance at justice, it steals your name, your reputation, and sometimes even your sense of reality. You start questioning whether people see you or only the version of you that's been manufactured. You begin to feel judged without ever stepping into a courtroom, sentenced without a single piece of fair evidence being weighed. But now the truth is surfacing, and with it the silent courtroom collapses. The whispers are becoming records, the lies are becoming evidence. The same tactics they used to break you are now exposing them. And as this shadow trial falls apart, the real story finally has space to be heard. Number 6. Their alliance proved it was never personal. Their alliance is the clearest proof that what happened to you was never just about bitterness, breakups, or misunderstandings. On paper, an ex, a lawyer, and a cop should live in separate worlds with no overlapping interest in your life. But when people from such different positions move in unison, it's no longer coincidence, it's coordination. Their cooperation reveals a network, a shared objective, and a common fear. You. Not because of anything petty or personal, but because your very existence disrupted a structure they were invested in protecting. If this had been personal, it would have ended with small acts of spite, gossip, arguments, maybe even legal threats. But the scale and sophistication of what they did goes far beyond that. This was a collective effort to erase your credibility, bury your truth, and ensure that the crime against you never saw daylight. Each person played a different role. Your ex provided access and intel, the lawyer handled the mechanics and paperwork, and the cop used authority to protect the cover-up. They were like separate gears in a single machine designed to grind you down. That machine was built to silence, not because you were weak, but because you were disruptive to their order. You weren't just another person to them. You represented a break in their pattern, a crack in their narrative, a force that could expose or undo things much larger than your individual case. Power hates exposure, and they recognized early that if you spoke freely, you wouldn't just reveal their wrongdoing, you'd reveal their methods. This is why their actions feel calculated rather than emotional. It wasn't about revenge for a breakup or some petty grudge. It was about neutralizing a person whose presence, truth, and survival threatened to destabilize an entire structure built on secrecy. You were never their target because of who you were to them personally. You were their target because of what you symbolized, a living contradiction to their control. And now, as the investigation unravels their collaboration, it's clear. This was never random or messy. It was systematic. And by exposing it, you're not only reclaiming your own story, you're also cracking open the larger network they were protecting. Their alliance proves the threat wasn't you alone. The threat was the truth you carry. Number 7. Evidence was never missing. It was buried. The claim that nothing could be found was never a sign of innocence. It was a tactic. Evidence doesn't vanish on its own. It takes hands, signatures, passwords, and planning to make it disappear. What they told you, that the proof wasn't there, wasn't just a lie. It was a performance designed to make you doubt your own experience. The truth is, the evidence always existed, but it was deliberately hidden, disguised or buried under layers of bureaucracy so thick it would take years to peel back. That's not incompetence, that's architecture. Behind every missing file is a person who filed it under a different name. Behind every destroyed document is a meeting where someone decided it had to go. Behind every lost recording is a chain of people who looked the other way when it was deleted. This isn't how justice operates. This is how cartels of silence operate. They turned public institutions into vaults where incriminating proof could be locked away, knowing that without evidence you would be left looking like the one with no case. They relied on time as a weapon. The longer evidence stayed hidden, the weaker they assumed your position would become. Witnesses forget. Victims get tired. Public interest fades. And all the while, the people responsible can step up to microphones and say, "We looked into it and nothing was found," as if their search was honest. That's how cover-ups survive. Not because the truth isn't there, but because the people who control access to it are the same ones who benefit from its disappearance. What makes this even more sinister is that their strategy wasn't to destroy all proof, but to scatter it, rename files, mislabel boxes, move documents into unrelated cases. So even if you found one piece, it would look incomplete. This fragmentation was intentional, a way of convincing you that your story was just a theory instead of a documented crime. Now, as the investigation peels back those layers, what was hidden is surfacing. The architecture of the cover-up is becoming visible. Every missing item that reappears is a fingerprint, every uncovered file a confession without words. They didn't lose the evidence, they built a maze around it. And the moment that maze is mapped, their entire narrative collapses under the weight of its own design. Number 8. Their hands shook while holding the pen. Every forged signature, every altered statement, every manipulated report was more than an act of corruption. It was an act of fear. People who truly believe in what they're doing write with confidence. They don't hesitate, they don't double-check, and they don't shake. But the ones who were covering up the crime against you weren't steady. Their hands trembled because they knew that paper isn't just paper. It's evidence that outlives their lies. Ink doesn't forget. Each falsified document was a silent gamble. They were betting on time, on secrecy, on the hope that no one would ever compare the handwriting, trace the edits, or question why so many errors lined up perfectly against you. And in the process, they left their DNA on every page, not literally, but in the form of sloppy alterations, mismatched signatures, suspicious dates, and inconsistencies that tell the story they were trying to bury. Those papers are like time bombs. The longer they exist, the closer they get to exploding in their faces. They knew it too. That's why their hands shook. That's why they created multiple layers of distraction, intimidation, and false narratives to keep people from looking too closely. Because the truth is, every stroke of ink was a confession waiting to be read correctly. Each forged signature says, "I was here, and I knew." Each altered report whispers, "I participated." And each fabricated statement screams, "This was never a mistake, it was a plan." Corruption always leaves a trail because fear makes people careless. In trying to erase the crime, they wrote new evidence of a bigger one. The irony is brutal. The same documents they thought would seal your silence are now the very things exposing them. Their attempts at control turned into a permanent record of guilt. That's why this moment matters. When the light finally hits those pages, it won't just reveal the crime against you, it will reveal their internal terror, their awareness of wrongdoing, and their unspoken admissions embedded in ink. Their handwriting is no longer just handwriting. It's testimony without a courtroom, confession without a microphone, and proof that the cover-up was never clean or confident. It was trembling, fragile, and destined to fall apart. Number 9. Corruption is always loudest in its denial. Corruption rarely hides quietly. It shouts. It stages performances. It throws accusations like smoke bombs to keep people from seeing where the fire really is. That's why the louder they insisted on your guilt, the more they exposed themselves. Innocent people don't need volume to prove their case. They let evidence do the work. But corrupt people drown out evidence with noise. They deny, deflect, and dramatize because deep down they know their position is rotten. Every time they tried to silence you, discredit you, or label you as unstable, they were telling on themselves. Their obsession wasn't about defending truth, it was about controlling the narrative. When someone's entire energy is spent trying to convince the world you're crazy, dangerous, or dishonest, it's because they're terrified that your story might actually be believed. And if it's believed, their entire operation crumbles. In that sense, their denial was never really about you. It was about protecting the mask they wear. Projection is one of corruption's oldest tricks. They accuse you of exactly what they're guilty of, so that when the truth surfaces, the public is confused. They call you manipulative because they're manipulating. They call you unstable because they're unstable. They call you a liar because they're lying. It's a preemptive strike designed to poison the well before anyone drinks from it. But ironically, the more they use this tactic, the clearer the pattern becomes. The fingerprints of guilt are all over the very stories they spin. Their denial, then, isn't just empty words. It's evidence. It's a roadmap to what they fear most. The intensity of their attacks is proportionate to the size of the secret they're hiding. That's why their voices were so loud, why their smear campaigns were so aggressive, and why their attempts to erase you were so relentless. You weren't just an inconvenience. You were a living risk to everything they built. And now, as the investigation uncovers their lies, the same denial that once silenced you is becoming their undoing. Their words are being replayed, analyzed, and contrasted with the facts. Their tone, their accusations, their performances, every outburst is now a breadcrumb leading straight back to their guilt. The noise they made to bury the truth is becoming the soundtrack of their exposure. Number 10. They didn't just break the law, they bent reality. What they did wasn't just a violation of the law, it was an assault on reality itself. Breaking the law can be traced, punished, and documented. But bending reality is far more insidious because it attacks your perception of truth, your memory, and your ability to trust yourself. They didn't simply hide evidence or falsify reports. They went after your mind. They wanted you to feel like the unreliable narrator of your own story, doubting your memories, second-guessing your instincts, and questioning your sanity. That's not just corruption. That's psychological warfare. This tactic is far more devastating than most people realize. It's not just about silencing you publicly, it's about silencing you internally. If they can make you believe you're exaggerating, confused, or unstable, they don't even have to refute your claims. Your own doubt will do it for them. That's why timelines were rewritten, reports were altered, conversations mysteriously disappeared, and records didn't match up. It wasn't sloppy work. It was a calculated strategy to dismantle your sense of reality. They understood that the human mind craves consistency. When you're surrounded by contradictions, people denying things you know happened, evidence vanishing before your eyes, events retold with altered details, you begin to feel like the problem is you. That's exactly what they wanted. They weren't just erasing the past, they were rewriting it so you would carry their lies as if they were your memories. This is why their crime is so much bigger than paperwork or procedure. They invaded your mind as much as your life. The real cruelty of this kind of manipulation is how invisible it is to outsiders. To the world, you look like someone struggling with confusion or instability, when in reality you're surviving a deliberate campaign to make you question your own truth. They wanted you isolated, hesitant, and too exhausted to keep pushing for answers. But bending reality always leaves cracks. Lies require constant maintenance. Fabricated timelines eventually contradict themselves. People forget which version of the story they're supposed to tell. And as those cracks widen, what once felt like your private nightmare becomes visible proof of their tactics. The exposure of this isn't just about proving a crime. It's about reclaiming your right to trust your own mind and showing that their psychological warfare didn't destroy you. It revealed them. Number 11. You were never supposed to find out. You were never meant to know the truth. That was the linchpin of their entire scheme. Keep you in the dark, and the machine keeps running. They didn't just want to harm you, they wanted to bury the evidence so deeply that you would spend the rest of your life confused, blaming yourself, or thinking what happened was just bad luck. The greatest horror for them isn't that you were hurt, it's that you found out how and by whom. Their power relied on your ignorance. Without it, their empire is nothing but a stack of lies waiting to topple. Every choice they made, suppressing evidence, silencing witnesses, altering records, was built around one assumption: you would never see the full picture. They gambled that you'd be too broken, too isolated, or too exhausted to keep digging. They counted on you living in a fog of unanswered questions, carrying pain without clarity. That fog was part of the punishment, part of the control. If you never connected the dots, they never had to face accountability. This is why the exposure is catastrophic for them. Their entire operation wasn't just about covering a crime, it was about erasing your capacity to name it. The moment you see clearly, their leverage dissolves. You're no longer a victim wandering in confusion. You're a witness holding a map of their actions. And once the map exists, other people can follow it too. That's how cover-ups die, not just through proof, but through the end of secrecy. It's also why their collapse feels so sudden. In reality, it's been building for years. Every lie, every falsified report, every secret conversation created a crack in their structure. The truth surfacing wasn't an accident. It was inevitability. They could delay it, but they couldn't stop it. The more you suffered in silence, the more evidence accumulated in the shadows. Now the horror has flipped. The same fear they once fed you is the fear that keeps them awake. They're no longer terrified of being caught. They're terrified that you already know. Because once you know, their entire system loses its teeth. You were never supposed to find out, but you did. And that knowledge is the beginning of their end. Number 12. The investigation is divine timing, not coincidence. This investigation surfacing now is not random, and it's not just the product of persistence or paperwork. It's timing on a level far beyond human planning. For years they relied on the illusion of control, believing that as long as they managed the narrative, silenced the right people, and hid the evidence, the truth would stay buried forever. But there's a point where human manipulation runs into a higher order that says, enough. That's what you're witnessing now. When you look at the timing of this exposure, it doesn't line up with the logic of the system. By their calculations, every detail should still be hidden, every piece of proof still locked away. People who could have spoken should have stayed silent. Doors that were once sealed should still be closed. Yet, somehow, the right information fell into the right hands at the right moment. That's not coincidence. That's orchestration from a place no man can reach. Divine timing doesn't rush, but it's never late. It lets corruption stretch itself out, thinking it's invincible, until its own weight becomes the trap. And when that trap springs, everything hidden is exposed at once. This isn't just about you being vindicated. It's about something larger being revealed, that even in the most carefully constructed lies, there's a limit to how long they can stand. What makes this even more profound is how it flips the power dynamic. For so long, they believed they controlled the clock, deciding when and how the story unfolded. Now, the timing is out of their hands completely. The exposure didn't arrive when they were ready. It arrived when the higher order decided the curtain needed to be pulled back. That's why the revelations feel so sudden, so unstoppable, and so precise. This is the quiet power behind divine timing. It not only exposes wrongdoing, it does it in such a way that the guilty can't spin or contain it. They can't prepare for it. They can't discredit it fast enough. The investigation is not just proof of their crimes. It's proof that their control was always an illusion. The timing of this moment is not man-made. It's a signal that the order of things they relied on is no longer theirs to command. Number 13. Their fear of you now is greater than your fear of them then. Once, they were the ones who decided the tempo of your life. Their power loomed over you like a shadow you couldn't escape. They had titles, positions, networks, things that made you feel small, powerless, even disposable. You lived under the weight of their threats, their manipulation, their ability to twist reality to make you look like the villain. You carried fear in your body like a permanent weight, unsure how much longer you could endure it. That was the world they built for you, a world where you were the one trembling. But something shifted, and it wasn't just evidence or exposure. It was you. You survived long enough to see the mask slip, long enough to gather strength, and long enough for their empire to crack under its own lies. The tables turned slowly at first, then all at once. Now the tremors aren't in your hands, they're in theirs. Their fear has grown louder than your pain ever was, and it shows in their desperation. Watch their behavior closely. The frantic denials, the sloppy cover-ups, the wild contradictions. That's not power anymore. That's panic. What makes this shift so profound is that it isn't just about external events, it's about internal balance. The truth you now carry is heavier than any weapon they ever had against you. It's not just proof of what they did, it's living evidence that you cannot be destroyed by their tactics. That kind of survival terrifies people who thrive on control. They don't fear your anger, they fear your existence. They fear the fact that you're still here, still standing, still speaking, and that their strategies failed to erase you. This is why you're untouchable now. Not because you're hiding, or because you've become invisible, but because their own corruption has made them vulnerable. They can't move the way they once did. They can't threaten you without drawing attention to themselves. They can't bury you without burying their own crimes. The hunter has become trapped by the very snares they set for you. Fear has shifted camps, and it's irreversible. The power you thought you'd lost was never gone. It was waiting for this moment. And now, as they tremble under the weight of your truth, you stand in the position they once held, not as a predator, but as living proof that their reign of terror is over. Number 14. You survived the crime and the cover-up. That's the real miracle. The crime was meant to wound your life, but the cover-up was meant to erase your spirit. One strikes the body, the other poisons the mind. That's the unspoken cruelty of these kinds of attacks. They're not satisfied with hurting you once. They want to destroy the possibility of you ever speaking, ever healing, ever being believed. The crime alone was devastating, but the silence built around it was engineered to finish the job. That's why your survival is not just impressive, it's miraculous. Most people think of survival as simply getting through something. But what you endured was an assault on multiple levels at once. You weren't only harmed, you were gaslit, discredited, and isolated. You were left holding pain that no one else would acknowledge, living under a manufactured narrative meant to make you doubt your own memory. They didn't just want to harm you, they wanted to erase your sense of self. And yet, here you are. You didn't just survive the wound, you survived the silence that was supposed to suffocate you. That's where the real miracle sits. Not only did you keep breathing, you kept your clarity, you kept enough of your spirit intact to recognize the truth when it finally surfaced. You didn't lose your capacity to name what happened. You didn't lose the fire that pushed you to keep searching for answers even when the world told you to stop. That kind of endurance can't be explained by luck or coincidence. It's evidence of something greater preserving you. This is why your survival is more than a personal victory. It's a living contradiction to their plan. The crime was supposed to bury you. The cover-up was supposed to make sure you never rose again. Instead, you walked through both and came out carrying the very evidence they tried to destroy. Yourself, your voice, your memory, your story. That's the power of divine preservation. It doesn't always prevent the wound, but it shields the essence of a person so that even after the attack they can rise, speak, and expose what was hidden. You're not just a survivor of an event, you're the survivor of a system, and your existence is the proof they never wanted the world to see. What you've walked through wasn't just a crime. It was an attempt to erase you from your own life. It was a coordinated effort, an ex, a lawyer, a dirty cop, woven together not by chance but by a shared fear of the truth you carry. They didn't just harm you, they tried to make the harm invisible. They built shadow trials, buried evidence, falsified reports, and rewrote timelines, thinking their silence could be stronger than your survival. Yet here you stand, not just as a witness, but as living proof that their scheme has failed. Every revelation now unfolding, the hidden documents, the alliances exposed, the timing of the investigation, proves something deeper. You were never alone in this. There's a higher order behind the timing, a divine intelligence pulling back the curtain at the exact moment they thought they were untouchable. You didn't just endure a crime, you endured the cover-up, the gaslighting, the character assassination, and the public smearing. And you didn't just survive it, you came out on the other side with clarity, strength, and a story no one can silence. This moment isn't just your vindication, it's a turning point for everything they built on lies. Their denials are louder than ever, because their fear is louder than yours ever was. The hunters have become the hunted. The hidden has been dragged into the light. The evidence they thought would stay buried forever now rises to the surface, and the truth you embody stands taller than their institutions. What they tried to destroy in secret has now become their undoing in public. You are not only the survivor of a crime, you're the evidence they could never erase, the testimony their hands could never rewrite. Your existence is the receipt, and the world is finally reading it. So as the curtain drops on their performance, hold your head high. You didn't just outlast their tactics, you exposed them, and in doing so, you've proven something larger, that no alliance of corruption can outlast a life preserved for truth. If this video shook you or opened your eyes, don't keep it to yourself. Like, comment, and share to let others see the truth. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another revelation that exposes the lies and empowers the chosen ones. Your voice matters. Join the movement, speak up, and shine light on what they tried to bury. God bless you.